Welcome, first grade teachers. I'm excited to be with you today and to kick off the Module 4 Unit 1 PLC Deep Dive. My name is Amanda Smith, and I'm the first grade ELA Curriculum Specialist for Charlotte Mecklenburg Schools. Thank you for joining me. We're going to begin with Module 4, an overview. So in Module 4, students explore the topic of birds and the ways that humans help them through a coherent sequence of literary and informational texts. Let's take a few moments to watch the Module 4 video.
First grade Module 4, Caring for Birds. In this module, your child will begin to take flight as a researcher, a writer, and a protector of birds. Here is where literacy meets purpose, where empathy and action come together through stories of bird helpers. Unit 2 has supporting opinions introduced, and Unit 3 takes action through literacy and artwork. Students will explore big ideas and guiding questions, such as, why should we care about birds? Why do people have different opinions about birds? And how can people care for birds so they live and grow? In Unit 1, students step into the shoes of kind-hearted characters who rescue, nurture, and protect birds. This unit begins with a surprise, a letter from a real ornithologist, a bird expert who watched your child's curiosity grow and now challenges them to dig even deeper. Through the reading of these engaging texts, students will begin to explore the question, why should we care about birds? They will build skills to compare characters within the 3 texts that they read. Students will also participate in the role play protocol as they act out scenes to better understand characters' feelings and the choices that they make. They will visually track how each character helps birds using the Stories of Bird Helpers anchor chart. Some people love and admire birds, and some are very annoyed by birds. But why do people have various opinions? Through the reading of City Hawk, the story of Pale Male, students will begin to unpack this very question. In this story, some believe that Pale Male's nest was a wonder to protect, and others believed that it didn't belong on a city building at all. They will begin to unpack the very reasons that support these various opinions. And at the end of Unit 2, students will participate in a structured discussion where they will share writing and have independent writing experiences. So when asked, why do people have different opinions about birds? Your child is learning to answer with thoughtfulness, empathy, and a voice that's ready to be heard. Your child will learn how to respectfully understand the values of others, even when they disagree. In Unit 3, your child becomes an advocate for birds, learning how we can protect them so that they can live and grow. They will analyze how human actions can harm or help birds. Students will also build vocabulary, identify cause and effect, and practice using text features. At the end of Unit 3, students will create a real-world project, the Feathered Friends Saver. Each project will consist of a scientific drawing and an informational writing piece. At the end of each unit, your child will have a check for understanding, as they will use anchor charts to create a sentence that compares and contrasts 2 stories. They'll write an opinion paragraph about Pale Male's nest, and they'll use stories to identify reasons that the author gives to support the points of view. And the learning doesn't stop at school. It can take flight at home too. Notice opinions in everyday life. Sketch birds together. Visit a local nature center, or even take a weekend trip to a place that protects birds. Always remember that reading is the best part of learning. Here are some books that you can check out with your child. The Eagles Are Back by Jean George. Pandora by Victoria Turnbull, Fly Free by Roseanne Thong, Horton Hatches the Egg by Dr. Seuss, Sparrow Girl by Sarah Pennypacker, Vanilla Ice Cream by Bob Graham, The Dead Bird by Margaret Brown, The Wild Robot by Peter Brown, The Jelly Bean Tree by Tony Yolen, and Pufflin Patrol by Ted Lewin. From heartwarming stories of people who care for birds, to real-world debates about how we share space with them, to powerful writing and art that helps protect them, Module 4 will take your child on a journey of learning, compassion, and action.
As we look at this unit through an interdisciplinary lens, there are several new generation science standards that are meaningfully supported throughout the text and discussions that students engage in. Students learn about how bird structure, such as wings and eyes, support survival, which aligns with 1-LS1-1. They also notice how differences, like Maggie's missing eye, affect a bird's experience, connecting to 1-LS3-1. Additionally, students analyze how humans identify problems and help birds recover, which aligns to early engineering thinking in the K2 ETS1 standards. It's important to be clear, though, that these standards are not fully taught or assessed in this unit. Students are not conducting investigations or designing and testing solutions. Instead, the science content provides context and meaning that strengthens students' understanding of the stories. That understanding matters because it gives students something concrete to compare. When students understand how bird structure supports survival and how help changes outcomes, they are better able to compare and contrast characters' experiences, which is the core literacy work of this unit. I hope you enjoyed the family video for Module 4 and have a plan to share with parents. What a great way to start building our own background knowledge for our upcoming module. Let's review our session agenda for our Module 4 Unit 1 PLC Deep Dive. In this session, we will explore the Module 4 overview and the Unit 1 overview, focusing on how it aligns with our teaching goals and objectives. Together, we will engage in backwards planning for the performance task and Unit 1 assessment. We will delve into the standards and targets, the lessons, and how they align to the assessment and performance task. Additionally, we will discuss planning strategies for RL 1.9. Lastly, we will reflect on the session and identify our next steps. Thank you for being here. Let's get started. Let's take some time to gather the materials we will need during our time together. You will need your teacher guide and teacher supporting materials, the PLC note catcher. You may use the bit.ly on the screen, a highlighter, a pen, and paper. I've also included the QR code and bit.ly for the All Things Literacy Canvas course. You'll want to go ahead and enroll if you haven't already. Pause the video here to locate your materials. The family video provided a great overview of Module 4. Let's look a little more closely at the module and what students are being asked to do. In this module, students build understanding about birds and the way humans help them. Across the module, students engage in both literary and informational texts to learn about birds' experiences, their needs, and why they matter. The module intentionally moves from comprehension of stories to building knowledge through research, then to communicating learning through writing and drawing for a real purpose. Each unit builds on the last, supporting students in developing deeper thinking, stronger language, and clearer communication. In Unit 1, students build a foundation for the entire module by listening to literary texts about birds that are injured or in need and the humans who help them. The instructional focus is on understanding characters' experiences, what happens to the bird, how it is helped, and how the experience changes the outcome. Students practice describing these experiences using story elements and evidence from the text. The unit culminates with students comparing and contrasting the experiences of characters across two stories, which is the first time they are asked to think relationally across texts in grade 1. In Unit 2, students shift from understanding stories about birds to examining different opinions people have about birds and how humans interact with them. Through research reading, students learn about pale male and the debate surrounding his nest, using both literary and informational text to understand multiple perspectives. Students are asked to identify opinions and gather reasons that support each one, drawing directly from the text they read and hear. This work is supported through structured discussions that emphasize listening, empathy, and respect as students learn to respond thoughtfully to others' ideas. The unit culminates in an evidence-based opinion writing task where students write to support the opinion that the nest should be taken down. Throughout the unit, reading, discussion, and writing are intentionally connected so students learn that strong opinions are built on evidence and clear reasoning. In Unit 3, students shift their focus to informative informational text to understand why people need birds. Students listen to and discuss texts that explain how birds help humans and the environment, and they practice identifying the reason an author gives to support a key point. Throughout the unit, students continue to strengthen vocabulary skills by using strategies to determine the meaning of unknown words, supporting deeper comprehension of informational text. This work prepares students to explain ideas clearly using evidence rather than opinion. The Unit 3 culminates in Module 4 performance task, where students apply what they have learned by creating an informational product for an authentic audience. Through writing and scientific drawing, students demonstrate their understanding of why birds matter and how humans can help them. All right, so our guiding questions and big ideas for Module 4. Why should we care about birds? Why do people have different opinions about birds? And how can people care for birds so they live and grow? These are the standards that are assessed in Module 4, and you may find this information also in your module overview. In Module 4, 3 new protocols are introduced to first graders. The icon sentences protocols introduced in Unit 1. The picture puzzle and vote with your feet protocols are introduced in Unit 2. Here's a list of the texts that are used in Module 4. This chart gives us the book titles and the unit in which they are read. You can see that Unit 1 is rich in text. This is because we spend a lot of time building background knowledge in Unit 1. This table also includes the texts that are included in the module materials, in the student workbook, or the teacher's supporting materials. In Module 4, we spend a lot of time working on habits of character. In this module, students work to become ethical people by treating others well and work to contribute to a better world by taking action to serve their community. Throughout Unit 1, students think about how characters in the stories they read show respect and compassion. They practice acting and reflecting on those same character habits in their interactions with peers. In Unit 2, students practice respectful and empathetic behavior as they engage in kindly listening to and sharing opinions. In Unit 3, students learn about the reasons to care for birds and different ways to help them. They create feather friend savers to give to local businesses or display in windows in the school to help birds. Now, let's dig a little more deeply into Module 4 with the Unit 1 overview. Unit 1 opens with a letter from an ornithologist celebrating students learning about birds in Module 3 and presenting the unit guiding question, how do characters in stories help care for birds? In this unit, students read a variety of texts about characters who help birds, including the lion and the bird, Pierre the penguin, and Maggie the one-eyed peregrine falcon. Students engage in close read aloud of the lion and the bird. This helps to build the skills they will need for comparing text during this unit. Then, as students engage in a series of focus read-alouds, they participate in the role-play protocol to help internalize the stories and their characters and make better sense of them. The Stories of Bird Helpers Anchor Chart uses icons to track the experiences of the central characters in each text. This helps students see similarities and differences between the experiences and the characters in each story. Through structured discussions and writing in response to text, students compare and contrast the birds' experiences. to find similarities and differences between them using evidence from the text to support their conclusions. We're going to start by reading the Unit 1 overview and answering these 4 questions. What will students be excited about? What will be most challenging? What logistical considerations are important for delivering instruction? And what supports are needed to implement this unit? Go ahead and take out a piece of paper and create the 4 cues chart, or you may choose to use the one in the note catcher. Turn to pages 28 and 29 in your Module 4 teacher guide and read the unit overview. This is going to give you a starting point for your 4-quadrant chart. As you read, you will want to go ahead and start adding to your chart. We'll continue to add to this throughout our session. You'll want to pause the video here and read the unit overview. Welcome back. I hope you were all able to add to your chart. As you prepare to teach a new unit, go to the Supporting English Language Learners section of the unit overview to see where some of the practices like language dives and conversation cues are placed in that unit. At the lesson level, you will find additional support for multilingual learners in the Supporting English Language Learners section of the daily lesson plan. This section includes differentiated levels of support for students with different levels of language proficiency needed for that day's work. Go ahead and read the unit overview, Supporting English Language Learners on pages 34 and 35 in the teacher guide. Pause the video and add to your 4 cues chart. All right, we're back. You can see my example of the 4 cues chart here. I think students are going to be excited about the stories themselves, especially because they center on animals and real-life situations where birds need help. Penguins, falcons, and bird rescues immediately capture students' interest and help them feel emotionally connected to the text. I also think that comparing and contrasting characters' experiences will be challenging for some students because they're asked to hold more than one story in mind at the same time and think beyond surface details. This kind of thinking is complex for first graders, especially when the texts are read aloud rather than read independently. Logistically, this unit requires careful planning and pacing. The routines such as role play, the icon sentences, and structured discussions are essential to student understanding and need to be protected from being rushed. The scaffolds in this unit are critical to student success. One of the most important supports is the repeated story structure of characters, problem, and solution, which helps students organize their thinking across multiple texts. Visual supports, including icons and anchor charts, they reduce cognitive load and make abstract ideas much more concrete. Sentence frames and shared writing provide students with models for how to express their thinking using complete sentences. When these scaffolds are all used consistently and as designed, they allow all students to meaningfully engage with the content and meet the expectations of the unit. Feel free to continue to add to your 4 cues chart as we unpack the rest of the unit today. All right, let's start planning with the end in mind. Backward planning is important because it allows us as teachers to tailor the curriculum to the unique needs of our students and ensure that instruction leads to the desired learning outcomes. So by starting with the end goals, such as assessments or key standards, we can prioritize lessons, we can adjust pacing, and we can incorporate additional scaffolds or enrichment as needed. Backward planning also helps identify areas where students may need extra support or where instruction can be condensed or even enhanced, making the curriculum more responsive and effective for the specific classroom context. And this approach ensures that the curriculum is not just followed, but thoughtfully adapted to maximize student success. We will begin our backward planning process by looking at the performance tasks through the lens of what students have to know and do to be successful. So in the Module 4 performance task, students create a feathered friend saver to meet a real need in their school or in their local community. They design a scientific drawing of a local bird to help prevent birds from flying into windows and write an informational paragraph teaching others important facts about birds. The task brings together students learning from across the module as they select meaningful information, use descriptive language, revise their work, and publish for an authentic audience. In just a minute, you'll pause the video and you'll want to read the performance task on pages 18 through 21 in your teacher guide. You'll also want to read and annotate the CMS performance task rubric. You can find it in the All Things Literacy Canvas course. It's also linked in your note catcher. All right, so go ahead and read the performance task and annotate it as needed. Jot down what students need to know and do to be successful on the performance task. Go ahead and pause the video and then come back when you are finished. All right, welcome back. Here are some things that students need to know in order to be successful on the performance task. They need to understand the purpose of the performance task, that their work has an authentic audience and a real world purpose. They have to have key knowledge about birds. They need to understand high quality informational writing, a clear focus statement, facts that teach the reader, a conclusion that wraps up the big idea. They need to know adjectives, conventions of writing. They also need to understand that revision improves work, that high quality work comes from drafting, getting feedback, revising, and editing. What are they asked to do, or what do they need to do in order to be successful for the performance task? Here are all the things that they are going to need to do. They're going to have to write an informational paragraph. They're going to have to use compound sentences and conjunctions. And so in order for them to use them, they're going to have to understand them. And then also they'll need to persevere through a multi-step process of the planning, drafting, revising, and publishing. Let's look at the Unit 1 assessment. So the Unit 1 assessment measures students' ability to compare and contrast the experiences of characters across two literary texts that are read aloud. Using familiar icons, anchor charts, and routines, students compare Pierre the penguin and Maggie the one-eyed peregrine falcon, and they write a sentence explaining how the characters' experiences are the same or different using evidence from both texts. The assessment is intentionally designed to mirror classroom instruction and specifically assesses RL 1.9 while drawing on supporting comprehension, language, and writing skills that are developed throughout the unit. You'll want to check out the CMS created rubric for the end of Unit 1 assessment as well. Go ahead and read through the assessment, highlight what students will need to know and do, and then jot down all these things in your T-chart. Jot down what the students need to know and do to be successful on the unit assessment. All right, welcome back. Here are some things that students need to know in order to be successful on the U1 assessment. They need to know what it means to compare and contrast experiences. They need to know what an experience is or what experience means. They need to know the story elements of each text, what the icons represent, because they're going to use that as a scaffold to help them and to help their cognitive load. They need to know how evidence works in a sentence and how compound sentences sound and work. Here are some things that they need to do. They need to listen closely to read alouds, and they've got to retain the key details. They need to ask and answer questions, repeat the process independently when they're comparing and contrasting, orally rehearse their sentences before writing, and write a compound sentence using evidence from both texts. Take a few minutes to add your additional notes to your 4 quadrants chart and see you back in a minute. All right, welcome back. Now we're going to take what we know about the assessment, the standards, and the learning targets throughout Unit 1. Unit 1 prioritizes deep comprehension of individual texts first, with students building understanding through RL 1.1, RL 1.3, And they do this before they're asked to compare characters' experiences across texts in RL 1.9. Throughout lessons 2 through 9, students are also engaging in speaking and listening, language, and writing standards as they discuss text, build language, and write about their thinking. While many of the standards are intentionally taught in practice, it's important to note that the end-of-unit assessment is specifically designed to assess RL 1.9. The other standards are embedded to support students in explaining their thinking clearly and successfully accessing the comparison work required by the assessment. And you can see here a few other standards that are covered in the unit as well. Now, we called out several reading literature standards. You will want to head on to All Things Literacy and grab this checklist and rubric. And this will enable you to academically monitor and track student mastery towards these standards in Unit 1. All right, so now let's look at our unit at a glance and find out where the standards are taught and assessed. So you're going to want to take some time to read over the unit at a glance and highlight or annotate the standards and the learning targets. Now that we've annotated our unit at a glance, we can add notes to our T-chart on the right and the left side. You'll want to match what you highlighted in the unit at a glance as closely as possible to what you noted from the assessment. So include the standard, the lesson, and the learning target. For example, I know that on the Unit 1 assessment, students have to compare and contrast characters in different stories. So when I annotated my unit at a glance, I made note of all the lessons in which students were given the opportunity to do this work. So now it's your turn. Go ahead and pause the video here, complete the T-chart by adding the standard, learning target, and lesson number, and you can find this in your note catcher. Welcome back. I really hope you took the time needed to do this work. It's important work. It helps us internalize the lessons, standards, and targets. And it's also important that we start with an end in mind because backward planning also helps identify areas where students may need extra support. All right, so we're almost done with the standards and targets. Go ahead and take a minute to reflect on what you just learned and add any new information to your 4-quadrant chart. Now we're going to dive into RL 1.9. The standard states, compare and contrast the adventures and experiences of characters in a story. Before we look at lessons or materials, we need to pause on the standard itself. RL 1.9 represents a major shift in thinking for first graders. Students are no longer just retelling one story. They are asked to think across 2 texts and focus on characters' experiences. That's a big cognitive leap, and it's why this unit looks the way that it does instructionally. One of the most important clarifications for teachers is what the word experience actually means here. Students are not comparing birds or settings, they're comparing what the characters go through. Being injured, being helped, healing, or returning to the wild. EL spends time making this explicit so students don't default to surface level comparisons. What do students need to know to be successful? We've talked about this a little bit already. This list helps explain why the curriculum doesn't just rush into comparison. Students need a strong understanding of each story's structure and meaning first. They also need to understand how icons represent ideas and how sentences explain thinking. Without this knowledge in place, RL 1.9 becomes guesswork instead of reasoning. RL 1.9 is not just about recognizing sameness or difference. It's also about explaining it. That's why students are repeatedly asked to talk before writing and to use icons and sentence frames. These actions are rehearsed intentionally before students are ever asked to do the work independently. So what are the essential concepts behind RL 1.9? Well, this is where letters comes in. Research tells us that students need concrete representations, oral rehearsal, and language support to do this kind of thinking. The curriculum's design choices, like the icons, the anchor charts, role play, sentence work, they all directly support these concepts. What might look like extra steps are actually what makes this standard accessible when they're doing this work. So why does this matter? Like before we even look at lessons? Well, up to this point, we focused on what RL 1.9 actually asks students to know and do. And this is important because it gives us a lens for looking at instruction. As we move in through these next lessons, we're not just asking what happens in each lesson. We're asking, like, how does the curriculum intentionally respond to the cognitive and language demands of the standard? So instead of listing what RL 1.9 requires again, this slide shows how the curriculum and the teachers should respond instructionally. Each of these strategies is intentionally designed to support the cognitive and language demands of comparing and contrasting character experiences. Anchor charts help organize and hold information so students aren't relying on memory alone. Icons act as thinking tools that make abstract ideas like experiences more concrete and visible. Oral language is used as a bridge to writing so that students can rehearse and refine their thinking before they're asked to put it on paper. Language dives give students the sentence structures they need to explain similarity and differences clearly, and role play allows students to physically and emotionally engage with characters' experiences, which deepens comprehension. Together, these strategies are not add-ons. They are the instructional design that makes RL 1.9 accessible for first graders. All right, so now let's look in the lessons. Like, how do these lessons teach RL 1.9? Well, in lessons 2 and 3, students are not comparing yet. Instead, they are learning what it means to understand a character's experience just within a single story. Through focused read-alouds and text-based questions, students identify the characters, the problem, and what happens to the bird. So the characters, the problem, the solution, and the ending. Students begin using icons on the stories of Bird Helper's anchor chart to represent these ideas. This work is foundational for RL 1.9 because students cannot compare experiences until they understand what an experience includes. Lessons 2 and 3 establish that shared definition and that visual structure. Lessons 4 and 5 deepen and secure students' understanding of a full experience. Students revisit Pierre the Penguin to identify not only the problem, but also the solution and ending. Role play and anchor charts help students solidify what changed for the character. And Lesson 5 introduces explicit language work through a language dive. You don't want to miss that. Students practice compound sentences using conjunctions like because and so. And this is intentional preparation for RL 1.9, which requires students to explain the similarities and differences, not just name them. By the end of Lesson 5, students understand the experience and have language to explain it. Now, looking at Lesson 6. In Lesson 6, students begin the work of comparing and contrasting characters' experiences across two texts. Using the lion and the bird and Pierre the penguin, students revisit each character's problem, solution, and ending, and use familiar icons, anchor charts, and role play to identify how the experiences are the same and different. Through text-dependent questions and structured discussion protocols, students practice explaining their thinking using evidence from both texts. This lesson marks students' first supported application of RL 1.9 with instructional routines that reduce cognitive load and make comparison concrete and accessible. Then in lessons 7 and 8, students continue to deepen their understanding of Maggie the One-Eyed Peregrine Falcon to complete a second character's experience. Students identify Maggie's problem, solution, and ending using those familiar icons and anchor charts to clarify meaning. And there's a language dive in lesson 8. This language dive strengthens sentence level language so students can explain experiences clearly using evidence. Together, these lessons prepare students to compare Maggie's experience to Pierre's with increasing independence. Now, lesson 9 is the assessment. So each set of lessons intentionally prepare students for RL 1.9 by moving from understanding one experience to explaining it clearly, then to comparing experiences across text. Lesson 9 is where responsibility shifts to students. The routines are familiar, but the independence is new. Students use the same icons, sentence structures, and oral rehearsal strategies they've been practicing all along. They demonstrate their ability to identify similarities and differences and explain their thinking using evidence from Pierre the Penguin and Maggie the One-Eyed Peregrine Falcon. The assessment mirrors the instructional work of the previous lessons, allowing students to focus on the thinking required by RL 1.9 rather than learning new procedures. Planned backward from the assessment and grounded in letters research, the lessons in this unit intentionally build students' comprehension, language, and cognitive readiness so they can independently compare characters' experiences as required by RL 1.9. The last thing I want to highlight are the checklists for each module that have already been created for you. Here you see a snapshot of the RL checklist and the SL checklist. You also see the language checklist. You'll want to print these out and use them when checking for understanding and giving specific feedback to students during the lesson. This information will also help you when completing the standards-based report cards. Just wanted to give you that quick reminder too. All right, so as we close, here are a few key ideas or key points that you'll want to hold on to. First, RL 1.9 requires students to think about characters' experiences, which is more complex than simply identifying similarities and differences. Second, the curriculum responds to that complexity by teaching the thinking and language students need before expecting independent work. And third, the strategies we've looked at, icons, anchor charts, oral rehearsal, and language dives, are not optional supports. They are what make this work accessible. So as next steps, our focus is not on adding anything new, but protecting what's already in the lessons. When we use the icons and anchor charts to support meaning making, and when we listen for students explaining why experiences are the same or different, we are setting students up for success with RL 1.9. Thank you for joining me. Please complete the attendance and feedback form, and I will see you next time. If you have any questions, feel free to email me at juliaa.smith@cms.k12.nc.us.